Test, test. I am so proud of you guys. I'm just blown away by
Hey, y'all. Hey, can you hear me? Testing, testing.
I love looking at this crowd.
this.
How's this? Can you all hear me?
This was
Is that good?
the most important historical moment in Jewish-Palestinian solidarity ever.
Perfect. You can hear me? Sounds great. And I'm ready to talk whenever you guys are ready.
Aaron?
Aaron, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Amazing.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we
Great.
can.
Perfect. Give me one quick second. Be right there. Give me 1 quick second.
All right. So we hope the film was thought-provoking, but mostly we're looking forward to hearing these two talk about it. And we're looking forward to answering your questions. So if you have any cards that you wrote questions on, please pass them towards the aisles. And our members of our team will pick them up and bring them down to us. So we now invite Israelism's co-writer and director, Aaron Axelman. And UCSF Professor of Psychiatry, Dr. Jess Hanam. To participate in a discussion of the film for you all. Aaron Axelman is a trans Jewish filmmaker based out of Somerville, Massachusetts. Israelism is their directorial debut. Aaron and co-director Sam Eilertson founded Tikkun Olam Productions, a nonprofit filmmaking collective that focuses on documenting and supporting movements for justice. Aaron has produced videos for Senator Ed Markey, as well as Congressman Jamal Bowman. They've also produced a series of short videos with Jacob Blake, who was shot by police in Kenosha, Wisconsin. In addition to Israelism, they are currently producing the upcoming feature documentary, Generation Green New Deal.
And it is my absolute joy to introduce Dr. Jess Hanam. He is a clinical professor of psychiatry and global health sciences in the School of Medicine here at UCSF. His research areas include evaluating the long-term health consequences of war on displaced communities and the psychological and psychiatric effects of armed conflict on children. Dr. Hanam has developed community health clinics in the Middle East that focus on developing community-based treatment programs for families in crisis. He is also a consultant with the Center for Constitutional Rights, Reprieve, and other international NGOs that work with torture survivors. Locally, he works to promote the health and wellness of refugee, displaced, and immigrant populations, and has established a community-based mental health treatment program to support Manasa communities. Here at UCSF, Dr. Hanam develops cultural competency training programs for staff, students, and faculty working with patients from the Middle East, and he serves as the faculty co-chair for the UCSF Center for Community Engagement. Thank you, Aaron Axelman and Dr. Hanam. We're gonna take a second to sort through your questions. You can keep writing them and passing them to the aisle. And in the meantime, take it away.
Oh, thank you very much, Ruth and Charlie. I've been at UCSF for a very long time, over 25 years. And I would say that tonight was one of the nights that I felt most proud to be on the staff here and faculty at UCSF, ever. We are in community tonight, and I just want to acknowledge how proud I felt to see all the student organizations standing in solidarity, confronting the genocide that's occurring right now in Gaza. It was amazing. But I think there's one group that needs special acknowledgement, and I want to say how proud I am of Ruth and Charlie and the new JVP at UCSF, that their commitment to justice and standing in solidarity with Palestine is something that my community will forever be grateful for. But more importantly, I want you to know that we are standing in solidarity with you, shoulder to shoulder, in your journey towards justice too. So thank you very much. And Aaron, I just want to tell you, man, great film.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
Appreciate it.
listen, I think it's really one of the most important films that I've ever seen. So I want to congratulate you and your team on this. Most of the scenes that you showed in Gaza and the West Bank, I've been there, I've seen it, I've been through it, I've been through the checkpoints.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to ask you the first question, if that's okay.
Of course.
Can you take me through your own process of how you got to the point of wanting to make this film?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, and thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for the organizers. It's truly an honor, and we're honored that our film can play a role in these devastating times. So, this film is, very roughly based off my own experiences and my own story, and even more closely related to the stories of many of my closest friends. Alicia, who's one of the organizers here, was a student with me back when we were undergrads. Alicia, you're amazing. And she and I really, witnessed so many young American Jews transform in pretty profound ways. And it made me realize that to the point where, most of actually the pro-Israel student leaders on our campus, most of them ended up doing pro-Palestine human rights work. It took some of them a very, very long time. The president of our university's Students for Israel group took him about 10 years, but he eventually began doing Palestinian human rights work. And so seeing so many young American Jews transform and realize that to live out our Jewish values to the best of our abilities, we must fight for the freedom and equality of Palestinians, made me really want to make this film. And I, as a young person, I did not go to Jewish day school like Simone or Eitan. Israel wasn't with me from birth like it was for them, but I fell in love with the traditional pro-Israel narrative in a very similar way that they did. It made me feel connected to my large Jewish community. It made me feel strong. It made me feel like I was part of something. But luckily, towards the end of my high school, I went to a random public high school in rural Maine, and a teacher of mine, amazing Irish guy. At one point, I was doing an independent study with him for an entire year, my senior year of high school, and I was going to make a documentary for this independent study on the history of Israel. Obviously, I was going to make a very pro-Israel documentary. I was a pretty ardent Zionist at the time. And at one point, he looked at me and he just asked me, he said, do you know anything about Palestinian history? And I said, no. Because all the books that I had read, the kind of pro-Israel books, only really mentioned Arabs, if anything, and they never talked at all about the history of the Palestinian people or of any of the Arab cultures in the Middle East. And so over the course of this year, he gave me all of these books by both Palestinian historians, including Rashid Khalidi, Edward Said, as well as a lot of progressive left-wing Israeli authors and American Jewish authors. And it made me realize that the narrative I had fallen in love with was a totally one-dimensional narrative that totally excluded the Palestinian people and only viewed the Palestinian people as an obstacle to the dreams of the Zionist movement and the Israeli state, as opposed to their own people with their own history and rich civilization. And it made me fascinated about what made me really interested in why and how I'd fallen so in love with that pro-Israel narrative and why it had resonated with me. And then when I got to college with Alicia, again, I saw all of these young people who, like me, after coming into contact with Palestinian narratives and Palestinians, began to realize that the narrative we had fallen in love with was not the whole story, and that the Palestinian people had been displaced, had been totally erased because of the Zionist movement and because of Israel. And it made me realize that, again, I wanted to be part of a movement to end the oppression of the Palestinian people. And I also wanted to do what I could to change my own community. So we began making this film about 8 years ago. It took us about 7 years to finish.
Wow.
Took us a long time. We were very lucky that we were able to get really amazing producers about 3 to 4 years in. Our two producers besides myself, one is Daniel Chalfin. He's actually a British Jew who joined the Israeli military as a young man and quickly realized that he was part of an apartheid system. So his story very much mirrors that of Eitan's. And then our other producer is Nadia Saad, an incredible Palestinian producer who's worked on Omar, Five Broken Cameras, the Netflix show Mo, a lot of the really amazing Palestinian media projects the past couple of decades. And this film came out in February, and we've been touring ever since. And we're really honored that the film can play a role, big or small, in this moment.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it, and appreciate your dedication to this film. We're going to take some questions, right? So you guys want to start? Charlie, you have the first question?
I do. This question says, I assume the film was made before October 7th. How do you think the Gaza genocide is intensifying this new awakening within the American Jewish community?
That's a great question. But yeah, it was made obviously well before October 7th. It came out, our world premiere was at a festival in February. So it came out maybe 8 months or so before October 7th. Obviously, the patterns and the transformations that our film shows have been ongoing for a number of decades. And even before October 7th, our community, the American Jewish community, was changing in profound ways. Polling before October 7th, and I encourage you guys to look it up, it's been cited widely on the right and left, shows that of all American Jews, this is before October 7th, amongst all American Jews, 25% of us think that Israel is an apartheid state, is committing the crime of apartheid. When you ask younger American Jews, 40 and younger, almost 40% think Israel is an apartheid state, is committing the crime of apartheid. So this transformation and this process of young American Jews beginning to actually look at is the reality of Israel as opposed to the fantasy of Israel has been going on and intensifying for many decades. And I think that pattern is only intensifying and becoming more pronounced now. We don't have great polling to see how the American Jewish community is changing. But I think from the growth of If Not Now and Jewish Voice for Peace and other progressive groups who've really taken leadership in this moment, I think our community is becoming more polarized. And also this transformation is becoming more pronounced. Folks like Abe Foxman and others in the kind of, established, Jewish, right-wing orgs have tried to make it seem for decades that we are united. The American Jewish community is united in their support for Israel. And that is obviously not true. What's more accurate is that we're incredibly divided. We were incredibly divided before October 7th. We're incredibly divided now. The transformation that is occurring, I think, will only accelerate in the coming years. I do believe firmly that my generation of younger Jews, that if we're not a majority already, we will be the majority, that a majority of American Jews will understand that Israel is an apartheid state very soon if we're not already there. So I think what's happened in October 7th and afterwards will only increase the polarization that we've seen in the Jewish community, as well as increase the transformation as more and more American Jews begin to look reality in the eye and realize that the stories we've been told about Israel are not the full story, and that Israel, tragically, very similarly to the United States and Canada and other colonial countries, was founded upon the dispossession of another people and has created a pattern of oppression that began during the Nakba and continues to this day.
So, Dr. Kalam, our next question is for you.
Okay.
And an audience member is wondering, what are the impacts on children living in Gaza with this continuing repression and the increase in violence that they're seeing on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've actually been looking at that for the last 25 years, looking at the impact of war, occupation, and settler colonialism on Palestinian children in Gaza. So it's a very grim answer, unfortunately. And in fact, people have heard me say this quite a bit. Typically, when we talk about trauma, we talk about this condition called PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. But for Palestinians, and especially Palestinian children, there's no P, there's no post, because there's never been a stop or a diminution or a break in the traumatic exposure and the traumatic trajectory, if you will, of trauma that Palestinians have experienced, essentially from 1948 to where we are today in 2024. So what it's called is multi-generational trauma, transgenerational trauma, intergenerational trauma, and a kind of trauma that never goes away. With that being said, some of the work that we've done has showed that Palestinian children, especially those children in Gaza, have 80% of the children, this is before October 7th, 80% of the children in Gaza had some symptoms of traumatic stress disorder. Just to give you that by comparison, when we did the same study looking at Iraqi children during the Iraq War and other children that were subjected to similar kind of situations, that percentage is 4 times greater for Palestinian kids than Iraqi kids or kids anywhere else in the world. So the amount of traumatic burden that Palestinians experience, especially Palestinian children, is unlike anything we've seen in the modern era. The impact is devastating. The impact has, it governs and it touches every single part of your existence, physically, psychologically, emotionally, cognitive development, brain development. It's rather significant. And people will ask me, well, what can we do about it? And it's like my colleague Noura Erakat said, if you watch that one CNN clip, what's your solution? It's really freedom. It's, you have to end the occupation, you have to end the apartheid, you have to end the oppression that is being brought to bear on Palestinian children and Palestinians in general. And the one thing to really keep in mind, because I talk a lot about Palestinians in Gaza, because that's where I've done most of my work, things in the West Bank are very bad, extremely bad. I mean, what you're not hearing about or seeing so much in the media is that there are Israeli military raids every single day in the West Bank. Palestinians are being arrested, they're being tortured, they're being put in military detention. And so the situation for Palestinians, whether they're in Gaza, West Bank, Jerusalem, or even Palestinians who are Israeli citizens right now, is a very, very grim one. And in terms of what we do, I mean, I was asked this question, I get asked this question a lot. It's like, well, do we do treatment? Do we do trauma therapy? And my feeling is, how do you do treatment when the trauma is in your face every single day? When it's part of the fabric and woven into the structure of your whole existence? And we have to really have a critical analysis, because we have to rethink our understanding of what it means to treat trauma in this context, right? Because it's not like the trauma we have here, right? You go to the ED here, you had a car accident, maybe you have PTSD symptoms, maybe not, you have treatment, you get CBT, you get meds maybe, and it resolves. This trauma that we're talking for Palestinians is unlike anything we've ever seen. So it's gonna force us to rethink how we go about treating multi-generational trauma that's infused with a system that is oppressing an entire community. So, and the freedom and dignity of Palestinians, then come and talk to me about treatment, okay?
All right, the next question is there a similar questioning among Israelis to the one you show among US Jews in the film?
Great question. It certainly exists. It's not nearly as common. It certainly exists, but it's not nearly as common. There is an Israeli left. There are Israelis who have both served and who refuse to serve in the military, who recognize that it's an apartheid system, who understand that Israel, like America and like other countries, is a settler colonial country, even though they were also refugees. Again, Israelis you can be both a refugee and a colonist, and Israelis obviously are. But it's much, much, much smaller. Again, if you think American Jews live in a bubble, Israelis live in even more of a bubble, which is ironic because Palestinians live so close to them. But again, the way that Israelis live in a nationalistic bubble is incredibly intense, to the point where, again, most Israelis can live their entire lives without meeting Palestinians or having real conversations with Palestinians or understanding the history of Palestinians and the Palestinian people. And, the land of Palestinian existence is erased from much of Israeli existence. I once interviewed someone for this film. We did about 80 interviews for the film. Only a pretty small portion made it in. I was interviewing a former Israeli soldier who was living in Berlin, who was an anti-apartheid activist. She was talking about how, she served for, I think, 2 years in the Israeli military. And during the weekends, she'd be with her parents in Israel. And then during the week, she'd be on our military base. And she did that commute back and forth between her military base and her parents' house every single week for 2 years. And it was only after she got out of the military that she realized that her military base was in the West Bank. So for 2 years, she served in the West Bank, and she had no idea that she was even in the West Bank. The West Bank is totally erased from Israeli maps. Usually it's totally erased. The idea of a Palestinian land or Palestinian state is totally erased from Israeli education and Israeli maps. And so there's such a lack of information and a lack of consciousness amongst many Israelis about basic facts about Palestinian existence that it's very difficult. And so again, while I'm inspired by the Israelis calling for a ceasefire, both Israelis and Palestinian citizens of Israel, it's a very small movement. The protest movement against Netanyahu before October 7th was primarily about domestic politics. There was an anti-occupation bloc amongst that protest movement, but it was very small. And so while I know that the American Jewish community is changing very quickly, the American Jewish community is a progressive community overall. Obviously, there's the entire, progressive except for Palestine, but we do have progressive values. And so when we realize that Israel's actions do not align with our progressive values, many of us change. Whereas Israel is increasingly a deeply nationalistic, deeply conservative country. And so the progressive values that we have are often not shared amongst Israelis. And so I think it's going to be much, much harder for Israelis to change en masse than it is going to be for American Jews to change en masse. Again, I'm very confident, and we might already be at the point where 50% of young American Jews, if they don't believe it's apartheid, at least believe that something is fundamentally wrong. It might be a very, very long time, if ever, before a majority of Israelis are committed to ending the apartheid system. So I'm much more hopeful about the American Jewish ability to change than I am about the Israeli Jewish ability to change at this point en masse. Although, again, I work with amazing Israelis. There are amazing Israelis who do anti-occupation work and who recognize both the occupation and the Nakba for what they are, but they are small, unfortunately.
Thank you, Aaron. We're receiving lots of questions for you both about how we talk to the people around us in this moment. And I want to read one in particular because I think it has some excellent questions, but feel free, both of you, to speak more generally about what we're doing these days with the people around us. But this person says, I'm an atheist Jewish teen. I want to reconnect with my Jewish heritage, but I am afraid that I will not be accepted as an anti-Zionist. Do you have any advice? Also, one of my best friends is Jewish and his mom lived in Israel. Recently, he said he wanted to visit Israel. How do I explain the genocide to him without alienating him?
It's a great question. Yeah, maybe I can take the first part. Maybe I can answer first, and then if you want to answer after this. I mean, I think when I was in college as well, it's often very difficult to find Jewish community because, again, at least for much of the past 50 to 75 years, the great majority of American Jews have been Zionist, have been pretty pro-Israel. But I think so. When I was in college, 15 years ago ish, beginning of college, it was isolating being a Jewish person, deeply critical of Israel, because the major institutions and major community spaces tried to conflate support for Israel with Judaism, which I did not resonate with. What I would say is that it's become much easier, partly because there are these amazing groups like If Not Now and Jewish Voice for Peace and many others who not only fight the occupation and fight Israeli oppression of Palestinians, but also are trying to create large Jewish communities and assert the fact that we can be Jewish and fight for Palestinian rights, and that we can fight for Palestinian rights while also fighting against anti-Semitism. As the film talks about, and as I believe very strongly, anti-Semitism is very real. Again, we obviously focus on it primarily on the right, but it exists across the political spectrum. People believe in Jewish conspiracy theories across the political spectrum. But hopefully, I think what my generation of Jewish people, really led by Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now, are trying to show is that we can be a Jewish community. We are just as Jewish as anybody else, and we are building the political infrastructure to oppose the occupation, and we're also creating the infrastructure to build our own Jewish communities. So I would say for people who are, who are very critical of Israel but really want to hold on to their Jewish identity, what's amazing is that there are now large Jewish communities that deeply oppose what Israel's doing, and it's much easier to be a Jewish person deeply critical of Israel because those communities exist. So I'd say, seek out your local If Not Now or Jewish Voice for Peace chapter. There's lots of other groups. Those are just two really big and important ones. But, we are just as Jewish as anybody else. I am doing this largely because I am Jewish, because my family has faced deep oppression. My family fled violent anti-Semitism a little over 100 years ago, and I see my own family's struggles for freedom as similar to the Palestinian people's struggles for freedom. And so asserting the fact that we are proudly Jewish and we fight for Palestinian rights is critical. And now there's a critical mass of American Jews who are saying those things, that it's much less isolating and much less lonely. So we're here for you, and there is a critical mass of people who will accept you for who you are. And the question about how to talk to Israeli relatives and stuff like that, that's tough. That's a tricky one. I can get to that. But, Doctor, if you want to respond first about
Aaron,
whatever they asked.
Yeah, Aaron, I think that answer was very good. And what I was going to say to the person who wrote that question makes me very sad to hear that, actually, that I have a lot of Jewish colleagues, peers, friends that I connect with who are really feeling a lot of intimidation right now for standing in solidarity with Palestine. There's a lot of fear in the Jewish community for standing against apartheid and standing against genocide. It sounds kind of crazy that one would have to feel fearful and anxious because you're coming out and saying, killing people is bad. Oh my God. Apartheid and oppressing people are bad. And it's shocking. Yeah, it's shocking. And yet we're in a climate, even at this university, where people are fearful about speaking and about speaking about something they have concerns about. And to me, that's really tragic. And that's one of the reasons, Aaron, why I think your film is so important, because it breaks it down. It breaks down the mythology of that. And I think the one thing Aaron said, which is really, really important, is that you shouldn't feel alone if you're part of the Jewish community and you're struggling right now. You shouldn't feel alone because you have powerful, strong allies, Jewish allies, Palestinian allies, multiple allies. You saw a whole row of allies here who will stand with you shoulder to shoulder in your struggle. Now, the only bad news I would have about that is that you may lose some friends, or you may find out who your real friends are, right?
Yeah, I really resonate with that. And I think, getting to the second question, which is, again, how do you talk to people who are more pro-Israel or whose family members are more pro-Israel? That's the $1 million question. And it's very, very difficult. I will say really first that even if it may seem like people can't change and that people are not going to change, people do change. Again, people do change. Every single Jewish person in our film that fights for Palestinian rights started out as unconditionally pro-Israel. Every single one, including Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky lived in a kibbutz in the 1950s. Even Noam Chomsky believed in the myth as well. Again, Alicia and I were at college, and there was this person who ran the Brown Students for Israel, and he was horrible. He would harass Palestinian students. He would come to Palestinian events, and it took him 10 years, but even he began to realize that he was wrong. And he now fights for Palestinian rights. And again, everybody I know at least has forgiven him. Like he changed. He was willing to change, and we love him for that. And again, about how to actually change people, again, it is very difficult, I think. And again, there's no magic bullet for this at all. I've seen many people change for many different reasons. Often it's, again, the personal stories of Palestinians living under apartheid that is most damning and is most shocking. I think, again, Simone recently said, the main character recently said on an interview that, the great majority of Americans have never met a Palestinian person. The great majority of American Jews have never met a Palestinian person. When you actually hear what it's like to live under a brutal military occupation where you are born into a different legal system based on your race, you can't unsee it. You can't unsee that. You can't unhear it. And so I think, again, that's why Palestinian voices are so critical. But obviously, again, if it's just, inter-Jewish conversations, I think one of the things is that, many of us in America grew up believing in the myth of America, right? And the myth of America is very similar to the myth of Israel, right? America was founded by refugees. It was, one of the first democracies in the modern world, a beacon upon a hill, a brand new country. And many of us began to realize over time in our lives that that was a myth, and that we actually are able to come to grips with the reality. And is it so hard to believe that Israel has a very similar myth, that there's actually a deeper reality to Israeli society that is just as ugly as American society, and our history is just as ugly as Israeli history? When people often tell me about October 7th, and again, I do work with many Israelis. When I was living in Israel, Palestine in 2011, I worked with this really amazing man named Mao Zanan, and both his parents were killed on October 7th. And oftentimes when I speak with American Jews who are very pro-Israel, they talk about October 7th, and I say, look, those lives, those 1,200 lives were precious. But if those lives were precious, are 30,000 Palestinian lives not precious? I mean, do you really think that killing 20 to 30 times more people is going to solve this or makes you humane in any way? And I think, again, their lives are no less valuable than Jewish lives. Their lives are no less valuable than Israeli lives. And I often as well, read the words of Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli ministers to people who disagree with me and ask them, do you not think this is genocidal language? When they call Palestinians human animals, when they talk about destroying all of Gaza, is that not genocidal language? And it's very painful for many American Jews to, again, look at the reality of Israel, just like it's painful for some Americans to look at the reality of America. But we have to look, we have to look. And it's a very painful process for many American Jews, but keep talking to people, right? Keep talking to your family members, keep talking to your friends. You never know what's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back and makes them realize. But again, if the president of Brown Students for Israel, if he could change, again, it took him 10 years. I don't know what got him to change, but people kept talking to him. And I truly believe anybody can change. My close family, very luckily, is very progressive and has supported me my entire life and with all my political decisions. But many of my family have not. But in the past few years, they have. I have an uncle who's over 80 years old. And if I'd made this film 20 years ago, he probably would have disowned me. Now, when he was about 75 years old, he began to look Israel in the eye and he began to look at Israeli history critically. And now he loves the film. He loves what I'm doing. It took him till he was 75 years old. So again, I don't give up on people. And I truly believe people can change and they will change, but it takes us talking to them and it takes us pushing the issue and forcing them to look reality in the eye.
Hey, Aaron, I would just add a few things that I think that's a very, very thoughtful analysis because, my whole profession is about thinking about how people change, right? That's kind of what I do. And I actually agree with you. People change for the darndest reasons. And you never know how people change, why they change. But you did say something that I would agree with. It's about the relationship that you have with people. Making that relationship and being honest and transparent about what you feel and what you think and developing relationships with individuals and with people over time, I think is really, really powerful. And I would add, watching this film with someone and having a discussion like we're doing today could be a very powerful motivator. And one last thing, I think taking a Palestinian to lunch is a great way to change someone's life. That's all. Anytime.
Well,
so, Aaron, when you come to the Bay, you can take me to lunch, okay, man?
yeah, okay. That sounds perfect.
Right.
That sounds great. It's a date.
All right, this question is, I feel powerless. What can I do?
Oh,
Want to go first, Doctor?
Yeah. Aaron's smart. He lets the tough questions come to me, right? Hey, listen. That question is a great question. And I could literally spend hours talking about it. And I will be honest with all of you. I go through little periods of feeling powerless and hopeless. That when I see the scale and the magnitude of the destruction that is happening in Gaza, when I see my colleagues, my peers, and their families being wiped off the face of the earth, I feel like, what good is it? Whatever I'm doing is not making an impact on the lives of people that I really love and care about. I can feel that sense of hopelessness or powerlessness. And then I remember, and it's basically what you said, Aaron, but that my mission and my job is to help people understand what is happening in Palestine, changing one mind at a time. One mind changing has the potential to change another mind and another mind and another mind. And really the way I think about it, and it brings me great sadness to see all the Palestinians that have perished. I mean, I'm sad every single day and I mourn every single day about it. But I think that for me, I'm doing this for future generations of not just Palestinians, but of Jewish Americans and Jews all over the world, because Jews will never be free until Palestine is free. So and when I let myself feel that, and I see, like tonight, what we've done here tonight in sense of community at UCSF and being able to speak with Aaron, I feel empowered by it. And so if you feel that moment of powerlessness, you just need to flip it, flip that script, as we like to say, and see the immense global solidarity that's happening right now, the immense solidarity that's happening across many different communities, and see that you're on the right side of history. And I'm hoping that will let you feel more powerful.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I really agree with what the doctor said. And, we're all just one person. We can only do what one person can do. But again, if enough of us do something, obviously something will change. And you never know what it's going to be. Again, right. I was born in 1989, so I didn't get to really witness the anti-apartheid movement. But from what many of my friends have told me, again, like in the, a lot of people in the 80s didn't think it was going to end in 5-6 years. They thought it might take a lot longer, and it ended in the mid 90s. I mean, and it took those people fighting every single day, not knowing if it would take 1 year or 10 years or 100 years. And it worked. And again, slavery in America lasted for centuries, and people fought it the entire time. And it obviously took far too long. But if people hadn't fought that entire time, it may have lasted far, far longer. And so you never know, again, the straw that's going to break the camel's back. You never know what history is going to entail, and you have to try as hard as you can. I almost gave up making this film many times. I applied a couple of times. I almost applied for regular jobs, and then luckily we would just get a little bit more funding. We could keep doing it for a couple more months, and you gotta just keep trying. And again, whether that's teaching people, teaching people is so important. If it hadn't been for that teacher in high school who gave me Palestinian books for the first time, my life would have been totally different. Baha Hilo, one of the two main Palestinian folks in the film, I met him when I was 21, walking around the West Bank in Bethlehem. Wow. He was a friend of a mutual friend that I had in college. She's like, yeah, let's go meet this guy. He's a nice guy. I work with him. And, I'd been anti-occupation for 4 years at that point, but he explained to me in such profound ways what it was like living in Bethlehem. It was my first time actually in the West Bank. It changed my life forever. He's one of my dear friends. And, and also if you're a student, learning is critically important. Trying to understand the history of of this entire thing, the history of the Palestinian people, of Israeli oppression, of anti-Semitism, learning, so that you can be the leaders of tomorrow and you can help us in the future is critically important. So, we did a screening 2 nights ago in Toronto, and a Palestinian woman, who actually just came here from Lebanon, was talking about how she felt helpless. And I was like, look, you're like 18 years old, like just learning is an incredibly powerful, incredibly important thing. If I hadn't just spent college learning, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing right now. So again, what you all are doing is very important, and just keep it up. And time will hopefully, solve this issue, and hopefully we'll see a free Palestine in our lifetimes.
Inshallah. So yeah, Aaron, what you said was really important, because historically, settler colonial projects sometimes take a long time to be dismantled. And if we look at Vietnam, if we look at Algeria, if we look at India, if we look at a lot of settler colonial projects, they took a long time. So I think it's important to, as you said, read about it, historical understanding, historical grounding, that really can help with understanding like the big picture of why we're in this struggle, and every day doing something, whatever that small thing is. So I liked your answer a lot, Aaron. Thanks.
Our next question focuses here at home. Says, people at UCSF are silencing criticism of Israel and Zionism, and I would add, including folks in the administration. How do we take this on?
Wow, that's probably, you want to take that, Aaron?
I'll let you go first. You know the local environment a little better, but I can give some advice about
Well,
other stuff.
yeah,
But you can.
well, look at, let me just be very blunt about it. Yes, people at UCSF and leadership are in fact attempting to silence our ability to engage in academic medicine and academic understanding of the health consequences of settler colonialism and the health consequences of genocide, which by the way are terrible. But that's what we do in academic medicine. We look at the effects of, structural violence on health. We look at the effects of incarceration on health. We look at the effects of lifestyle. We do this all the time, and it's perfectly acceptable, and it's perfectly valued, and faculty and students, we do this every day. But when we talk about Palestine, that's the PEP, Aaron. That's the progressive except for Palestine, okay? This is where we see the impact of power. We see the impact of an internalized, and we've talked about settler colonialism, but we didn't talk about internal colonialism and how many of us, including here at UCSF, have internalized some anti-Palestinian racism, some Islamophobia, and have this really kind of twisted, if I might say, view of what it means to fight for freedom and self-determination. And for us to be silenced, to be able to speak out. Listen, we're all health professionals or committed to health. When is it not okay to say genocide is bad? When is it not okay to say, don't bomb hospitals? When did it become a crime to say, don't kill doctors? And if you know what's happening here at UCSF today and tomorrow at the Regents meeting, we actually have the Regents, which run the entire UC system, Aaron, are actually entertaining proposals where in the academic center of the University of California on all of our campuses, we're not going to be able to talk about political things too much because you don't want to take a political stand on things. Yeah, that's actually being discussed as we speak. And so there's this conflation about standing up morally and ethically against genocide and against settler colonialism and saying, now, that's too political. We really can't talk about it. And that's part of the power play that's happening right now, not just at UCSF, but at the academy throughout the country. And we've seen it at Harvard, we've seen it at Penn, we see it at Columbia, and now it's getting revved up all throughout the UC system. Y'all have to realize that there's a lot of money out there that wants to dismantle DEI. They want to take it out. They don't believe in this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion. By the way, I'd like to add a J to that. JEDI, justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But that's just my own pitch. They're going to they want to dismantle it anyways. And so what do we do about it? We have to fight back, and we are fighting back. And the best way to fight back is to be in numbers. We have to all be in solidarity with each other. We have to work together on this because guess what? Especially for the students, you pay everybody's salary. So y'all got a lot of power, and for sure. And we really have to push back against this attempt to basically stranglehold and tell academics what they can think, what they can say, and what they can study, which is antithetical to the whole idea of a spirited intellectual debate about what's happening in the world. It's really bizarre. So I think we have to fight it. You know something about this, Aaron?
Yeah, it's been,
right?
Yeah, we do. And again, I have a lot of respect, for academics and student groups who are fighting, because in some ways, again, even though our film has been kind of part of a lot of these campus fights, it's the faculty and students who are taking the risks. It's the faculty and students who are facing the consequences. A university can't do anything to me, but they can do something to the universities or student groups. And it's been amazing to see, faculty and student groups, when universities have tried to censor our film, they stood up for us and they faced consequences and looked the university in the eye and called their bluffs oftentimes. When Hunter College's president tried to cancel a screening of our film, within 24 hours, the Hunter Senate, made up of faculty and students, resoundingly voted to veto basically her decision and screen our film, which was incredible. At UPenn, it was a progressive Jewish student group that was bringing us. Penn just said that they couldn't screen the film because it endangered students, and they were essentially saying endangered Jewish students, and we're like, well, it's a Jewish student group bringing Jewish filmmakers to campus. Like, what Jewish students are you talking about? Like we are the Jewish students. Like we're, and the Jewish Penn students said, no, we're going to screen this film. Like it's actually really easy to screen a film. We're just going to do it. And UPenn said no, and they were like, no, we're doing it. And then half an hour before the screening, they called the student and threatened disciplinary action for show. And he was like, well, for what? Like we're showing a movie, and we did it. And he called their bluff, and we just did it. And the university has not given them disciplinary action. Barnard, the president of Barnard right now, is trying to cancel all screenings of Israelism on their campus, even though, again, it's Jewish faculty that are trying to bring us. And we're just going to do it. And again,
hey, Aaron,
yeah.
let me tell you something. Let them try to cancel. It'll just make more interest in the film, right? So it's a great marketing tool,
exactly.
right?
No,
just let them do it. It's so crazy that they want to cancel this film. It's bizarre.
Yes,
it's bizarre.
It is bizarre. It's bizarre.
So
but again,
I say
it proves
let them
the
do
point.
it, because we had a full house here today.
Every time, thank you. No, every time someone tries to cancel the film, it proves the point of the film, which is, again, that people are terrified of just honest conversations about the role of Israel in American Jewish life and about Israeli history, right? We talk openly and honestly about American history. We need to also be able to talk openly about Israeli history. It's not that hard. But for me, when the university says no, we just say, no, we're going to do it. And there's no real risk for us. And as an artist, right, again, I run my own, I help run a small nonprofit, and no one can fire us. So it's easier for us in some ways, but we're really grateful to the student groups and the faculty who are fighting, for free speech and fighting for academic freedom. And I think it's also important to note that academic censorship is not new. In the 1970s, when there was massive Vietnam protests, the exact same thing happened. Students were murdered at Kent State for protesting over Vietnam. Again, this is not new. And just like the students who protested the Vietnam War were on the right side of history, and they played a role in helping to end that war, we too need to just keep going and not be afraid, and just keep going.
All right. This question is, I struggle to understand why the US is so allied with Israel. Is it because of AIPAC's financial and political influence? How do you understand this relationship?
Yeah, that one, obviously,
Go, Aaron.
It's a number of things. There's many reasons why the United States government has supported Israel historically. Partly, and again, some of them have to do with what the film covers. Some have nothing to do with what the film covers. From a just real politics standpoint, America has seen Israel as a key military ally for a very long time in the Middle East. So independent of its Jewish nature or the American-Jewish relationship to Israel, America sees it as a strategic ally. And that is tragic, but that's just how it views it. Christian Zionism is also a big part of this story, which our film doesn't cover at all. It's a totally different thing. But many evangelical Christians and white people in general vehemently, strongly support Israel, either for incredibly bizarre religious reasons or just for racist reasons. Because even though many Jews are not considered white exactly, they see them as more similar or whiter than other Middle Eastern people. So there's the racist element of it. I think also, to a certain extent, this matters a lot to me. I always talk about the fact that the world abandoned the Jewish people right when the Jewish people needed the world, right? Right as anti-Semitism was rising in Europe, as Nazism was rising, America closed its doors to Jewish immigration. But after America won World War II and essentially conquered the world, the Holocaust became a huge part of America's narrative, right? It became part of the reason why America won World War II, fought World War II, and kind of conquered the world, because they were fighting the great evil that was Nazi Germany. And so I think also supporting Israel has kind of become part of our national myth to a certain extent. And again, it's deeply ironic because America fought World War II, not because the Jews at all. They did not care about the Jews whatsoever.
That's right.
They fought it for geopolitical reasons, had nothing to do with the Holocaust. They did, but it became part of our narrative about why we joined World War II and why we kind of conquered the world. It was to defeat the evil Germans, not because, again, Germany was just a geopolitical threat to America's interests. So again, it's deeply tragic that our trauma, the Holocaust, is often now used as part of America and Britain and France's narrative about why they do certain things they do. Also, and lastly, because for so many decades, the majority of our community and the leadership of our community talked about, told American leadership, if you want to support American Jews, you need to support Israel. So that narrative of, well, if you want to support the Jewish community, you support Israel, has been maintained, even though now the American Jewish community is incredibly divided. So again, the ADL and AIPAC will basically say, support Israel because of us, even though, again, that's not real, it's not actually accurate at all, because we are now incredibly divided. So those are to me the most important reasons why Israel and the US are so close politically. And again, some of them have to do with what our film discusses, but there are other issues at play here, that even if all American Jews began fighting for Palestine and Palestinian rights, it wouldn't solve this issue. There's other reasons why America supports Israel, but American Jews are part of it. And that's why, I think we have a role to play in this, but we're not the only, part of the puzzle.
No, I think that's a really good answer, Aaron. I don't think I have much to add, except just to emphasize one thing you said, is that Israel becomes a very important geostrategic military asset for the United States, collecting intelligence, doing intelligence operations, and running military operations for the entire region. So it's seen as a very key military ally. So that's just part of the picture, but your answer is really good. Thanks.
All right, Aaron, there is a tremendous amount of support for your film. There are people requesting it to be played all over. I'm not going to read it all. People excited for what you produce next. But I will ask, is there a way to pay to stream the movie so that people can watch it again?
Yes, there is. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, 6 months ago, or 8 months ago, no one knew what our film was, and it is, and we worked on it for 7 years. I mean, it was a long time. This is my first feature-length film, and the fact that people are watching it is a pretty wild thing. It's obviously become a relevant film, partly because of the genocidal acts occurring right now. So that obviously is part of that. It's obviously a resource now too, which we appreciate. But it's hard to feel happy, obviously, about how the film's going. But yes, you can watch it. So basically, if you go to our website, Israelismfilm.com. So just Israelismfilm.com. There's a rental link right there. Anybody can rent it for $5. We also do lots of free screenings online. So basically, like almost all of our in-person screenings are free, and all of our online screenings that we do every couple of weeks are free. We then use the rental funds, basically keep those to pay for all those things. We're a very small nonprofit. But yeah, so you can rent it right now. We're getting it on all the video on demand services as well, like Apple, TV, Amazon, all that stuff. We're pitching to streamers. The streamers know about our film, definitely at this point, which is cool. They're probably not going to take it now. And so we're an independent film, but there are ways to watch it, and we really appreciate that people are watching it. So thank you, everyone here. Spread the word, please, about our film. And it's largely been because of word of mouth that people have started watching our film. So I really appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that information. We are rapidly running out of time. We have 2 minutes left. So just looking at the audience, Aaron, I don't know, can you see everyone here?
A couple times they've zoomed out and I've been able to see the whole audience, which is pretty cool.
Great. So for your context, this is an unprecedented moment in UCSF's history. We had 12 co-sponsors standing up here giving solidarity statements at the beginning, a packed house with 300 people watching. So this is just the beginning, right? So is there anything you would like to say, both of you, in the last few minutes we have as parting words as we all head out back into the world?
Well, Aaron, I just want to thank you for your courage and your dedication to doing this film. And I want to acknowledge the courage of Jews who stand in solidarity with Palestine, because it's a unique kind of courage and bravery that it requires. And just deep appreciation to you and deep appreciation to your film crew for making this film. And again, deep appreciation to Jewish Voice for Peace at UCSF. This is our big announcement of our organization here at UCSF. So thank you for helping us initiate that, Aaron.
Hey, no, thank you. Yeah, first I want to really thank, Dr. Gadam. It's an honor to get to speak with you and to be part of this. I really want to thank all the organizers. Again, I knew part of that. We have so many screenings right now that I didn't even know. I didn't even know that there's 12 groups. That's incredible. I'm honored. If you guys want to do another screening, anytime
We'll let you know, man. We'll let you know.
Anytime you want. I want to thank Alicia as well. Thank you so much, and thank you all. Really, really appreciate it.
Aaron Axelman, Dr. Gadam, thank you so much for sharing your insight and wisdom with us here tonight. Thank you to the numerous people who put in tremendous effort over the last weeks to make this event possible. Thank you for the restaurant, Taboon, who provided the food tonight. A Palestinian-owned restaurant just down the street. Thank you to everyone who came, all of you. Thank you for showing up with an open heart and mind, ready to learn and change and commit to action. Again, scan the QR code if you're interested in joining any of the co-sponsoring groups, and we'll reach out. We hope each of you leave tonight infused with the energy of our solidarity, and may we all move forward with love, courage, and moral clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Seriously. Okay.